We have our distinguished guest, Mike Cardinal, a friend of the Academy, and also the Director of Business Process Management Office for the Americas from Thirdera. Mike is going to take it away.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it. And I apologize up front for the quality of my voice. I am battling some illness, getting near the end of it, but didn't want to leave folks hanging without a topic to talk about this week, this month. And Lisa Schwartz had approached me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago and asked about me doing another webinar. It had been a while. And in thinking about what to talk about this month, it really came to me that we are in a very interesting age, right? So we've just come out of this this COVID era, trying to move beyond that, and the changes that brought. And we're into this era or this season where we're hearing things like quiet quitting and the great resignation, the emergence of new AI technologies like ChatGPT and some of the Google and other AI kind of activities. And it occurred to me that in all of this, one of the things that sometimes I think we forget about, we get so caught up in technologies like ChatGPT and others, we forget about the people. And it's really, to me, the people that are the important aspect of all of this, of people, process, and technology. And this was an idea that I had put forth probably 8 to 10 years ago. And so I kind of dusted that idea off and decided I was going to kind of talk about how do we, even in this age, this unprecedented age of emerging technologies and capabilities like AI and other things, how do we keep a focus on the people side of things? So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how we can learn some lessons from people who are a little bit outside the technology sphere, but apply them into our world of service management and ITIL and ITSM and those kind of things. So what are we going to talk about today? So what is that challenge? I kind of introduced that challenge a little bit. Want to talk about exactly when we talk about people, who are we talking about? What can those people do for our organizations? Looking at people and understanding what is the best fit for people. When do we kind of come alongside those folks and build that mentorship, or we kind of let them go and do their thing and we have some trust? And then how can we motivate people and get the best out of them? And ultimately, what is it that people bring to the table? So the challenge, as I said, right? So processes, technology, they're everywhere, right? These days, even from 10 years ago when I first started thinking about this, everyone has phones. Technology is everywhere, and it's becoming just this ubiquitous thing. We don't even think about the fact that at one point in time, we didn't have all of this technology. It just is. I have a young granddaughter, 18 months old, 19 months old, that I got sick from. She goes to daycare, which is just the root of all disease. And she is already super savvy on technology. She knows the difference between a phone and what she calls Pop Pad, an iPad. She calls it Pop Pad. My grandpa name is Pop Pop. And so even at 18, 19 months, she understands at a high level computers and technology and what it can do for her. And she knows how to scroll on the iPad and understands YouTube. She understands when the little skip ads button comes up, that's the button you have to press to move forward. So, the technology is changing at an ever increasing pace. The difficulty or the challenge is people are not changing. People have been pretty much who we are as humans for at least 10,000 years. Right. So technology is moving forward, all these things are moving forward, but we as people are pretty static. And so there's becoming this gap between this technology and the people who design it, support it, use it, maintain it, gain from it, all of those. And the problem is in my eyes at least, the technology, if it hasn't already, will soon or in the future create such a gap that we'll always be behind the technology. And I think in the form of things like ChatGPT and the AI world, we're starting to see that, right? That the technology is becoming just that closer to human capability. So we need to keep pace with that, right? So how do we do that? How do we keep pace with the technology? Well, we do that by understanding who are our people. So when I say putting the people back in people, process, and technology, or when we talk about our people or my people or the people on my team, who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about employees, right? And you have to understand that the concept of an employee, someone who works for someone else and receives wages or salary, is a fairly new concept. You'll notice here I did a Google Docs search or a Google Word search on the word employee and how much it's appeared in books over the last couple of hundred years. And you'll note before about 1880, very few, if any, references to this concept of an employee. Before that, there was not really this sense of someone working for someone else in a wage type way. It was more of a creator and receiver or customer and buyer situation, even when you were working in a factory kind of situation in the late 1700s to early 1800s. It's really with the advent of a work by a gentleman named Frederick Winslow Taylor that this idea of an employee takes off. And the problem with what Taylor said was he took a very negative view towards employees, right? And he differentiated these two levels of people: management or executives and employees. And you'll notice this quote from his book in 1911. His book was called The Principles of Scientific Management. Hardly a competent workman can be found who does not devote a considerable amount of time to studying just how slowly he can work and still convince his employer that he is going at a good pace. In Taylor's eyes, employees were no better than brutes. He called them brutes in his book. That an employee, a person below a management level, below an educated level, was no better, was good for nothing more than moving pig iron around, bars of smelted iron, right? So this is not a good way to start out a history of ensuring that we see people as really the important resource in things. So this is sort of where we begin. Now, fortunately, we go beyond that. And one of the things that at one time before my IT world, I was actually a teacher. And one of the things I taught history. And one of the things I was particularly focused on was the study of society and culture throughout history. And one of the things that we can learn about things is that ultimately, when we talk about the culture of things, the culture of things is really made up of all the cultures of individuals. And so when we look at an organization and say, how do we move beyond seeing employees only as brutes or, people who are working only enough to get by, how do we kind of know what we need to do to move them into a bigger, more important position in our world? Well, we do that by understanding what makes up culture. Right. And from a work by a gentleman named Carroll Quigley, we have a definition of culture: the known environment in which we work, live, and interact. And so a culture is something that each of us has. I have a culture, each of you has a culture, and it is the combination of those cultures as employees, as staff, as leaders that really make up the organization and how well it can provide the needs of its customers. And there are, what Quigley talked about is that there are 6 levels or 6 components of every culture, or elements of culture, going from the basic protective on up to the intellectual. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, very much in line with that, where you have to provide people, you have to provide those employees with some basic protective things, right? They want salary. They need to feed their families. You need to give them structure in terms of organization. You need to show them that they are part of a bigger thing and that they provide value. You have to recognize that people aren't individuals in a sense that they can survive as individuals, right? We are group-based people, right? We work well and survive well when we are working together. So you have to sort of see the social aspect of people. You have to understand the spiritual. And here I'm not just talking about religious things. It's really more than that. It is, what do people need internally from sort of the heart, right? Do they need to feel needed? Do they need to feel wanted? Need to feel like they are part of a bigger thing here, right? So the value, social and spiritual all combined together. And then the intellectual, they need to feel that what they contribute to an organization, what a person can do for an organization, is seen and valued, right? So when we think about all of these components, we can kind of look at people and say, are we doing these things for our employees, and move beyond just what Taylor said and treat them as a very important part of our organizations. Once we know sort of those components of culture, then what we can do is build from there to a larger set of values and ethics that make up the whole of our company's cultures. So we have to start when you're looking at who your people are and what they can contribute, start with their personal culture, right? What are the personality, the talents, and the skills that those individuals bring? And how can we best use them? We'll talk about some of that later. Only once you've done that and looked at each individual should you then start to think of the team and the unit or the department culture and how you can collaborate and work together to drive these outcomes. Once you have that, then you can kind of see that the values and ethics are really just the icing on the cake. Too often, what we do is we try to drive culture from the top down towards people. What I'm advocating is that we start with the individuals and we drive outward towards the company's culture, and see that a company's culture is really made up of all the individual cultures that you have in your people and the teams that they form and the organization as a whole. And you'll have a much easier time recognizing the importance of people and then working with them to help them contribute to the overall culture. All right, so now that we understand sort of who our people are, right? They are the core, they are the elements that make up our organizations from a cultural standpoint, from a delivery, from a knowledge, from a social and spiritual perspective. What can those individuals do? What can we use them to help succeed in our organizations? Humans are amazing. Humans, if left to do what they do best, can solve some of the most amazing things, some of the most amazing problems. Here is a small, just an iota, a speck of all the things that a human can do that technology has not been able to do on its own. Solve Fermat's theorem. Fermat's theorem was a math theorem that for generations and decades, hundreds of years, no one could solve. They put it through computers, couldn't be solved. And then along came a British professor and solved Fermat's theorem. Smallpox and polio, right? These were things that humans in collaboration, Jonas Salk and others, working together with technology, were able to solve. Going to space, putting an airplane into the air. You don't realize sometimes how complex and elaborate it is to put a giant metal tube into the air. Electricity, right? Folks like Tesla and others who are able to harness the power of electricity that no one had been able to do that before. Getting down to the microscopic, into that very small level of the human genome, right? These are all problems that if you let your people work on these, they will find answers to them. They may not come quick, and they're not going to do it alone, right? So if this isn't just one person, it wasn't just one person, Jonas Salk, solving the problem of polio. It was a team of people with Salk as the sort of core or the trigger for that, or the spark for that. Love this quote. Einstein is one of my favorite folks in time. We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. You may know this as Einstein's insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. right? We have to free our people up to solve the tough problems. Technology is not going to help us solve the tough problems. People using technology will solve the tough problems. Innovation, same thing, right? We were able to harness things that existed and turn them and improve them to the point where we could then make great leaps and bounds. And if you look at the history of mankind, you'll see this, right? We didn't just one day create some kind of uh, fire system, right? We harnessed fire. We saw things on fire and we harnessed that. We used it to then cook meat. We created language. We were able to communicate. We took wild growing seeds and we harnessed those and able to then grow agriculture. Steel, right? We took metal, dirt in the ground, and we were able to extract metal out of that dirt and turn that into something super strong, even up into computerization, the internet, digital world, AI. I mean, if you look at things like AI today, amazing innovations, but you have to let people go there. You have to drive people, or let people drive towards those things, not drive them, but let them drive towards these things. And again, a great quote from Steve Jobs, not one of my favorite people, but I think he had some great ideas. I want to put a ding in the universe. Right. And by that, he meant, I want to go beyond what we know today, right? Go beyond what the thinking that is today. It goes along with Einstein's quote before, right? And move beyond. So if we were to free people up to do these things, just imagine what people can do instead of hampering them and controlling them and not letting them sort of strive towards greater things. All right, so once we know who our people are, right? Once we know what are the possibilities or the opportunities that we could free them up to do, where do we put them so that they can best do those? Well, this is where some friends like Marcus Buckingham can help us. So if you've not read a book called First Break All the Rules, he's got a couple of other ones. So Now Put Your Strengths to Work and some other things. You should go read this. It's a little bit older, but it is a timeless work. And in this book, Buckingham, he did this giant study of managers and people, right? Over 400 companies, 80,000 managers, in using Gallup as his mechanism. What he found is that we too often think about people and their skills and not enough about people and their talents. Talents are inherent. We are born with them. You can't learn them over time. Talents are things that you have that are natural to you. Skills are learned. And when you go to put people into positions, you should first think about their talents, not their skills. They can learn the skills. They can learn what you need them to learn. They can't learn how to be the person that you need them to be. And what he talks about in the book is that there are 3 talent types: striving, thinking, and relating. So people have some talents, and it's not that you only have one of these. You have a combination of all these 3 types. You may have some that are more prevalent than others, but striving kind of talents are things where people think about the why of a person. Thinking talents really show us the how of a person, and relating talents show us who of a person. Right? And he goes through and shows you how to use these different talent types to understand, let's put people into the right places based on their talents instead of their skills. And he showed through this study, the vast majority of people fail at their job, not because they're not skilled enough, but because they're in the wrong job based on their talents. And when you can find the right place for a person based on their talents, then they will thrive. Okay, they will do well. So the revolutionary insight that he comes out with can be kind of summed up this way. And I kind of started the webinar today with this, right? People don't change. They don't change that much. Once you become an adult and you've kind of been around and you've done some things, you're pretty much who you are. Your personality develops pretty early on. You are who you are, right? They don't change. So don't waste time trying to put in what was left out. People are who they are. Recognize they are who they are. try to draw out of them what was left in, that's hard enough, right? Getting people to really grow in their talents and grow in their inherentness is so much harder than people realize. And you have to focus on that rather than, oh, that person can't do coding very well, or that person can't do X very well. Well, maybe they're really not at heart a coder. Maybe there's something else. And they were looking for a way to make some money. Look at your people, understand what they can do, right? Love this quote from Buckingham: people are not broken, don't try to fix them, right? They're not broken. They're just in the wrong places. And this happens all the time. And I see this in ITSM all the time, where we try what we call availability as a skill set. Oh, well, Cardinal's available. Let's put him into this job. Yeah, but Cardinal doesn't know how to do that job. Yeah, but he's available. So let's throw him into that job. All right, let's put him in there. That is using people's based on availability and thinking I can just force them to learn and grow and do those things. You can't, right? The other thing we can do is understand that people have different intelligences, right? I see this all the time, right? And I think in the US in particular, we're really bad at this, where we look at people in terms of what makes a person a genius or special. We limit it to kind of two things: the mathematical capability that a person has, right? And that's basically your IQ tests the mathematical or logical mathematical skills that a person has, and their physical capabilities. So we promote sports people over teachers. We promote sports people over high important musicians or great musicians or great speakers sometimes, right? So we tend to see very limited intelligences and qualify that a person is only smart if they have one of those two things, right? The sort of bodily kinesthetic, that's the sports side of things, or the logical mathematical. Howard Gardner did some work way back in the day, 50s, 60s, I believe, where he said, yeah, there's more than one type of intelligence, right? There's visual spatial, there is the physical bodily kinesthetic, there's musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, linguistic, and yes, logical mathematical. But don't limit yourself. If somebody's got some great mathematical capability, great, get them to a job that needs that logical mathematical kind of skill. That's where your database people and your coders are probably going to live. But what about your business relationship managers? Well, that's going to be someone who's going to have more of an interpersonal and an intrapersonal capability. That's going to be a person who has inherent talents of relationship over problem solving, right? So these are the kind of things you want to think about for people. And when you're thinking about the roles that you put them in, because we often start with like a RACI chart and we go, okay, I got this RACI chart, I'm going to just throw people in it. Like I said, availability is a skill set, instead of asking ourselves, who really is the best person to fill the process owner or the product owner role? Well, let's look at some of these intelligences. Let's look at what the talents that person needs. That'll tell you who the best person is for that role. Another thing, there's a whole realm of these. I just picked one of these, is to use something like a personality test. This is gaining steam. Once again, these were pretty popular back in the 80s, late and early 90s, maybe. They're starting to gain steam. Many organizations are starting to use personality tests again, recognizing that idea of the talents and the personality is far more important necessarily than the skills. So one of these is called the DISC personality type, stands for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And the idea is people don't fall into only one of these. They fall into all of these, but they have more in one area than others. So you may be something like a high D and a high C. So you're falling more to the left. You know how to, you're very much in terms of taking charge and covering challenges, and you know how to follow rules and regulations. On the other side, yours is more the people aspect of things. So when I first did the DISC personality thing, someone explained it to this, right? So imagine you go to the store, you buy a bicycle or a barbecue or something that needs to be put together. A dominance person would look at it, throw the manual out, and just start putting pieces together. An influencer would be someone who would say, hey, let's all go get some beers and come together and put the barbecue together as a team, right? Steadiness would be someone who would read through all of the material and throw a party and have others sort of bring in and talk about it, and just those kind of things. And then conscientiousness would be that person who would step by step read through the rules, step by step do the instructions, have all the pieces laid out and organized, and in the end would have the best barbecue, right? So this would be one of these. There's Myers-Briggs, there's all sorts of these out there. The best team I ever worked on was based on one of these type of things, where the manager purposefully brought in people from the 4 quadrants of the particular one we did. And what happened with that was we fought for the first 6 months, right? Norming, storming, forming, performing, or forming, forming, storming, norming, performing. Sorry, my brain's a little off today. And we fought, till we kind of saw, oh, we each have our own talents and let's kind of work together. And then we were an unstoppable force, right? Because we hit all of the key personality types. Another thing that you might do is use something like the 5th discipline from a gentleman named Peter Senge. So Senge lays out in this book called the 5th discipline how to take an organization and move it from simply individuals contributing to this idea of systems thinking. And if you're into DevOps and all of that, one of the principles of DevOps, right, the 3 ways of DevOps, is systems thinking. You know where that comes from? The 5th discipline. It was Senge who really laid out this idea of systems thinking, that an organization needs to think and see in a holistic sense, that everybody needs to work together, and that actions that you take have influences to other parts of the system, a system being anything that takes multiple parts and pieces and works together in concert. So you have to move from personal mastery to systems thinking. And looking at what Senge talks about and understanding what are the different archetypes and ways that people work, you can actually drive people into a more effective system thinking way of working, and people will start to see the big picture, as it were. Talking about mastery, if you're not a fan of TED Talks, you should be. TED Talks, technology, entertainment, and design is what it stands for. A series of talks that people give. There's also a podcast that kind of summarizes them from NPR, National Public Radio here in the US. And one of the great TED Talks was by a gal named Sarah Lewis. She was an art professor, and she talked about this difference between success and mastery. And what she did was she went and studied a group of archers, particularly female archers that were on this team. And what she found is that these archers would spend, 8-10 hours a day shooting arrows. And her original thought was, oh, they're trying to master things simply by doing it over and over and over again, right? And she didn't understand why they were so driven to do that. Once they hit the bullseye, weren't they happy? Why did they continually strive to hit the bullseye? And what she found in studying these folks is that there's a difference between success and mastery. So success is something that is externally driven. It's something you're doing for someone else. It's something that someone sees from outside of you. Yes, you hit the bullseye, you got the 10 mark, the 10 ring, successfully. But for a true master, that's not enough. right? And I love this quote from the TED Talk. Success is hitting that 10 ring, right? The bullseye. But mastery is knowing it means nothing if you can't hit it again and again and again and again. And she says that she uses the Olympics then to talk about something called the near win, that what drives someone to master something is the near win. And it's not the gold medalist who really has been the most successful in her eyes. It's the silver medalist, because what the silver medalist sees is, although they didn't win, they weren't quote unquote successful, they were at that moment of almost being there, right? Maybe it was just a second behind or just a point off from whoever won. And it was that drive to not only succeed, but to master things that drove them. And so it was that almost finish, that incomplete moment that drove people to master things. And again, if we let our people sort of drive towards mastery, that is that internal drive, and let them accomplish things that they believe are going to be very valuable, you'll actually be more successful with your folks. Right. So go check out her TED Talk. It's only about 12 minutes, I think. All right. So now that we know what we can do with folks and how we sort of place them where they need to and how we free them up to do what they need to do, how do we support them? And this is where we have to decide, do we come alongside them and mentor them, or do we move away from them and sort of let them do what they need to do? Well, one approach is mentoring. And if you're not familiar with Greek history, mentor is not just a verb that we've come up with or a noun that to assign to somebody. Mentor was actually a person. So this guy on the right-hand side, the older guy here, this was mentor. And mentor was known as a person who would take under his wings younger Greek people, and he would teach them and he would advise them and he would guide them. And in this case, his most famous mentee is a gentleman named Telemachus. And mentor and the relationship between mentor and Telemachus really sort of set the tone for this idea of mentoring. And this is where this term comes from, was the way that mentor kind of worked with this young individual. And it wasn't just mentor telling Telemachus, do X and you'll be successful. It was an exchange, a conversation. They were often seen walking in what's known as the stoa, the porch in Athens, where mentor would be talking with Telemachus, asking him questions, taking a book from Socrates and, asking questions and, how are things going? What did you learn from this? That's double loop learning, not just doing an action, but getting feedback. Again, we can pull the history of DevOps right from these kind of things. Another of the principles of DevOps, double loop learning, that comes from this idea of mentor, right? So when you're mentoring with people, don't just look at it as a one-way thing, right? That the older or more experienced person is telling the other person how to do things. It's more about an exchange, a conversation, and both sides can learn from this conversation, from this exchange. Also think about things like the work of Patrick Lencioni. So he's got another book out recently. I need to pick it up, but this is his older book, very well known, still very much a situation or a book that we can learn from. And in it, he talks about these 5 dysfunctions of a team, 5 things that teams aren't doing well that they need to correct. And the one I want to focus on is this one at the bottom, right? Trust. So you do have these other ones, right? We want to have constructive conflict. We want to have that double loop learning and learn from each other. People need to be loyal and committed to the success of the team. People need to have accountability and attention to results. But it's all based on this bottom idea of trust, that if individuals can't trust each other, they're not going to be successful. There's a very famous statement from Ronald Reagan that says, trust but verify. To me, if you have to verify, you don't trust. Trust is inherent, right? That's what trust means, is I believe in you to be able to do something that I'm not going to micromanage you and I'm not going to double check you until such time as I can't trust you anymore. So if you demonstrate things that break that trust, now I'm going to be on you and I'm going to verify, I'm going to look at it. So again, if you give people activities or tasks or those things, trust them to do them, give them the time, the resources, whatever. This is really all a plea to stop micromanaging folks. Doesn't work. Right. So what is trust? When we talk about trust, right, one of the things that we can look at is this matrix, and trust is really the coming together of consistency and sincerity. So when you build trust by having both consistency and sincerity. So how do you do this? Well, first, as I said, you need a presumption of trust. I believe in you. I think you can do it. Go do it. There is openness in communication so that when something is told to someone, it's you don't hide your expectations from people. You tell them what you're going to expect of them. Honesty and transparency, right? It's the only way that trust is going to work is when people are open and honest and transparent with each other. There are follow throughs and people have to follow through. So when they say, hey, I'm going to do this, then they really do it. And until they don't do it, then you should trust them. And then again, part of the openness is that we admit mistakes. Hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, no harm, no follow. Let's do something else. Story I used to tell in classes was of a guy who there was a project, multi-million-dollar project, and it failed. He was a project manager, so he packed up his desk. The CEO saw him leaving, called him in, said, hey, why are you packing up your desk? He's like, well, I just tanked a multi-million-dollar project for you. He's like, yeah, you may have done that, but more importantly, I just taught you a multi-million-dollar lesson. Right. So he had trust in him and recognized that mistakes will happen and we have to kind of go with that. So by looking at this matrix, right, what we need to do with people is be sincere with them. And that's part of openness and honestness. And we have to be consistent. Where people lose trust in things is when you have low sincerity and low consistency, right? The message is always changing. The sincerity, I don't believe you, those kind of things. That's when we have low trust. And we want to try and get to this high trust idea. So how do we do this? How do we build some of these trusts? Well, we want to have effective communications. And one of the ways that we can do that is to have effective interactions with people. And I know this doesn't so much apply anymore because we're much more virtual, but even in, web situations and web camera situations, you can do these things, right? Clear off your desk, right? Get rid of distractions when you're having conversations with people. When I have one-on-ones with people, the only thing I have in my hands is my cup of coffee or my glass of water. Right. So I clean off my desk. Look for eye color. If you can't tell me what a person's eye color, you haven't been paying attention to them because you're not looking them in the eye. As a leader and someone who's helping people to be successful, ask more questions, talk less. Right? You learn a lot more by asking questions, letting the other person talk more. Lubricate the conversation. That is, prompt people, but don't hog the conversation. Goes with one before that. Don't keep talking over and over again. Lubricate the conversation by asking those questions. Just give them a prompt, right? Sit on the edge of your chair. This was much more important in the physical world, right? That you are attentive to people, right? You're not leaning back, you're not relaxing, whatever. They see the body language there. Take notes. If you are of such a person that you don't have a great memory and you do need to take notes, keep them simple, write them out. Don't do notes on a computer while you're talking with somebody because you're going to pay attention to the computer. You're not going to pay attention to that person. Take notes by hand, learn to write. It's too bad calligraphy or penmanship is no longer taught in school, lost art. And then turn off your phone. Don't respond to emails. Turn all that off while you're paying attention to somebody, and they will respond a whole lot better to you. Hold people accountable. Right? How do you do that? Well, be hard on the problem, soft on the person. People are not the problem. Deming, and there's my cue to, Donna said Deming. So Deming said it's 90% of our issues, our root causes, our process, not people. right? It's not the people, it's the system in which they work. Fix the system, be hard on the problem, soft on the person. Give a person as much as you think they can handle, and then give them 10% more. Don't push them. Don't push somebody to 100% more than you think they can handle. They're going to fail. You're going to set them up for fail. Have them write down what you've told them to do. I need you to fill in this succession plan, or I need you to fill in this continuity plan, or I need you to go and approve change records by this date, so that it's written down. Otherwise, and you see them write it down, or they tell you they've written them down. Due dates, I'm not a huge fan of due dates because they're arbitrary things that we do, but it gives people milestones to move forward. But don't be afraid, if they need just that little bit more time, give them a little bit more time. Watch for the verbal cues that they go, yes, I got this. I can do this. I'm going to have this back done, right? Get this done. Have them repeat back effective learning. Here's what I heard you tell me to do. Check in with them just as hey, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job or micromanage, but do you need anything? And then trust them, let them do what they need to do, and then follow up later. So how can we motivate people? How can we get them to do better with all of this? Love the work of Daniel Pink. He's got a couple of great books out there. One is called To Sell is Human. We all are selling something at some point in time in our jobs. Our jobs are 100% sales. But in a book called Drive, he really showed some key things. And if you're not familiar, just go out and Google Drive YouTube or Drive RSV. I think it's called, or RSA. There's a video where he talks about this study that was done by MIT and some of the biggest university, Carnegie Mellon and some others, where they studied productivity and studied what motivated and drove people. And what he found was very surprising. What this report found was very surprising, that for autonomous kind of, or not autonomous, but for blue collar manual jobs that didn't require a lot of thinking, jobs that require a lot of just repetition of tasks and those things, the more you pay someone, the more productivity you get out of them. But when it comes to knowledge workers, and most of us are knowledge workers, the opposite is true. For knowledge workers, the more you pay a knowledge worker, the worse the productivity goes beyond a certain amount. So when you take care of somebody's basic needs as a knowledge worker, right, they've got a decent salary and they're making a decent amount of money, and their basic needs of protection and food and shelter and clothing and all those things are taken care of, then what people really want are these three things. They want to exhibit mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Right. And I think this applies very much to most of the service management world, right? Is that you have people who want to become better at something that matters, right? That's going back to Sarah Lewis and that mastery. It's not just about, hey, I succeeded this one time. I want to succeed over and over and over and over. I want to be that expert. I want to be that master. I want to be seen as, a go-to person. Autonomy. They don't want to be micromanaged. And I think this is a big reason why some of the productivity drops for some of those higher paid people when you try to pay them more, is you pay them more, but then you micromanage them. They want to just kind of be set on a direction and left to go. And Pink shows that in his book and in the videos, he shows that some of the great inventions, some of the great innovations and problem solving in the world were not done during office hours. They were done on weekends when people are off doing what they want to do. So he talked about Atlassian, the Jira folks. He talked about how they would be given one day a month and they were allowed to do whatever they want. And they would do the same thing that they did at work, but they would work on projects that they wanted to work on. So they would go code on the weekends, even though they spent all week coding, and they'd solve some of the most amazing problems, right? So that's autonomy. And then purpose. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to leave a legacy. I advocate that everyone in an organization not only has a personal culture, every one of us should have a personal mission statement. My personal mission statement: leave my campsite cleaner than I found it. Yes, it's an old Boy Scout, Girl Scout trope, but I think it's important. I don't ever want to have someone accuse me that I caused chaos and a mess when I've left an organization or left a job, I always want it to be better than I found it, right? Even if it's just by a small amount. So this is what drives us, right? And think about this for your own people. Another thing that you may find surprising is the practices of Bruce Lee, famous martial artist. He had a personal philosophy that he developed called Jeet Kune Do, way of the intercepting fist. And it was what drove not only his martial arts and how he was able to be such a great martial artist, but it drove his whole life and philosophy. And here's sort of in a nutshell what he talked about, right? So when you think and act with your people, with your employees, with people, your coworkers, even with people above you, right? What are you thinking about? What's on your mind? Ask people, what are you thinking about? What is really on their mind? Maybe they're worried about, my like I said, my granddaughter's been sick, so that's been on my mind, right? Is, this poor little innocent girl, is she going to get better? Right. So those are the kind of things that are going on. What's people caring? Simplify. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Occam's razor. Simple answer is always the best. All right. Not only when you're interacting with those people, when you're having conversations with coworkers, with teammates, with employees, with managers or leaders above you, how are you acting in those interactions? What is driving you? Right. Don't split the party. Don't divide, right? Don't drive a wedge between things. Try to unify, try to bring things together. And then you don't need outside validation, right? Now, there are people who love to hear great things and affirmations about them. That's not what we're talking about. What Lee was talking about is don't wait for others to tell you how good you are. Believe in yourself, right? You don't need others to confirm when you feel good about yourself. Feel good about yourself. Be proactive in all things. This is particularly important in service management, I think, right? Be proactive. Problem management, put problem management in place. Not enough organizations do good problem management, right? This is being proactive. And then be you. Why would you want to be anyone else? Don't wear a mask. I am who I am, whether you meet me in the wood shop, I'm a woodworker, at home, at work, I am who I am. And I don't make any bones about that, right? I know who I am, and I try to practice all of these things. So how do you develop people then? How do you take these things and get a person to be better? Well, choose somebody, choose them for talent, right? Hey, I think this person's got this talent, right? They're a relator or they're a good communicator, a teacher, right? That's my talent. I'm a natural teacher. So choose a person for that talent, set those expectations of what you expect them to do with that talent, right? And talk about it not in outputs, but in outcomes, right? Move away from the output idea, move towards the outcomes. Have people say, all right, I'm going to work on defining or getting better in this one aspect of being a teacher. Or I'm going to learn to teach, two other people how to do this thing. And then focus on their strengths to motivate them. Don't try to fix them. They're not broken. They're not something that you need to try and correct. Focus on the strengths. Oh, this person is really good at communicating. Let's get that person working in a role where they can communicate better. And then that'll come with this last one, right? Find the right fit for them. Work towards people's talents and work towards putting them into the right position and let them shine. So in the end, why do we need people? Why do we need people in the whole mix of work? Why do we need employees? Why do we need coworkers, teammates? Why do we need leaders and people on teams and these things? Well, it's pretty simple. Okay. Here are some quotes from people, really smart people over time. Adam Smith, Develop Capitalism. The value of any commodity, right, was not the thing. The value of the thing is not in the thing. The value is equal to the quantity of labor which it enables him to purchase or command. Labor, therefore, is the real measure of the exchangeable value of all commodities, right? It's what you put into it. It's what us as a team or as an organization or as a group of people put into technology. It's not the technology that brings the value, okay? Also, right, think about people as investments, that they are investors in your organization. They are bringing with them their human capital as an investment in the organization. They are not something an organization owns or controls or uses. I'm not a huge fan of calling people resources or assets or those things. People are people, right? Treat them like people. And they can make decisions. Let them make decisions, as Davenport talks about. Love this couple other quotes here. This is my favorite down here. Love Thoreau. If you haven't read Walden, you should read Walden. Great introspective kind of view of a person who is kind of takes himself out of the mix of society and sees what he learns. And one of the things he learned while sitting in a cabin in the woods near Concord, Massachusetts, for 2 years, I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams or her dreams and endeavors to live the life which he or she has imagined, they will meet with success unexpected in common hours. Let people dream, let people see themselves as part of the whole mix of the organization, see people as using process and technology, but see people as the single most important part of our organization, not from an asset or a resource or a cost perspective, but simply from a people perspective. All right.
All right.
That's my thing.
Okay, great. We do have one question from Kristen saying, would you put knowledge with skills? People say they know something, but they don't. Talents, great, agree with that said, but if work requires knowledge and a person doesn't have it, it creates a problem, especially don't know they don't know, but they still make decisions.
So knowledge is really, and this is actually in ITIL too. Knowledge is something that binds talents and skills together, right? So knowledge, even from ITIL, right? Knowledge is made up of 4 components: data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. The data and the information side, that's the side that aligns with skills. The knowledge and wisdom, that's what aligns to talents. So it's really the piece that brings and locks those 2 things together, Kirsten, right? It's the elements that have to be in place. You are right. If a person doesn't have that knowledge, they're also not going to be successful. But if they don't have the talent, then they're not going to be able to learn the knowledge or drive the knowledge to go beyond just data and information, right? So you have to have really that lock or that connector between them in the form of knowledge. I'm just advocating, and the authors that I talked about are advocating, Buckingham, that start with talent, because that tells you the how the soil is, right? What's the soil in the person? You can then grow them into the knowledge and the talents that they are, the knowledge and the skills that they need to be able to do the work. But if the soil's not productive, it's not going to work. Give you an example. Let's say somebody's really more of a communicator and they can learn how to code, but it may just not be what drives them, right? When they get to that near win, they may go, okay, I wrote some good code. And that's it. Then they're done. They're not striving beyond that. With that talent, then they can strive more and go, not only was that good code, I could do better, right? I can improve it. Every time I look at something, I go, I can make it even better. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, great. We have another question. Can you offer a perspective on rewarding people?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes to the same question, and thanks, Kirsten, for that question. It goes to the same question of, if I can bring all of those things to the table, then those are the things that I can look at to reward, and recognize kind of what Daniel Pink was saying is paying people. Everybody needs to have a house and home and car and food and all those things, right? So yes, pay people until you take money off the table, right? The idea being reward them until they feel that they're settled from that perspective. They're not worried where their next paycheck's going to come from, those kind of things. And then start rewarding them in mastery, autonomy, and purpose. I got to a point in my career where, yes, raises were great, right? But what I was really hoping for was, hey, I'd love the opportunity to be able to go speak at conferences or attend a conference every year. Is there a cost to that? Sure. But you don't have to pay that money to me. You can just say, hey, because of all your great work, we're going to let you go to, the HDI conference, or we're going to let you go to, my team's a ServiceNow team. So we're going to let you go to the ServiceNow conference this year. Or, hey, we're going to let you have a couple of days off every month just to work on things that you want to work on. And if they help the company, great. If not, great. Just some ideas. Thanks, everyone.
Any other questions? Nope, just a lot of thanks and great presentation. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.
All right. Cheers.